there, my name is Trinity, and today I'm going to be showing you all of my all-time favorite books ever. So I'm fairly new here on the BookTube universe, I guess you can say. I don't know if that makes any sense. So you don't know my favorite books. I wanted to show you some of my all-time favorite books. However, this is only going to include my romance and my general fiction. Really loves 5 out of 5 all-time favorite books, just because I'm going to make an entirely different video on fantasy and fantasy series, just because I've read a lot. I've read a lot of fantasy. So let's get into today's video. So the first book I am going to show you, I actually read in high school as part of a reading assignment. A few of you may have also read it as a reading assignment, but I ended up loving that book so much and carrying it with me for so long that I had to go out and buy my own physical copy. So I have The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. So this book takes place in 1939 Germany. It is about a little girl named Liesel who's going through kind of everything they go through during the war, and her family ends up harboring a Jewish man in their basement, and it's kind of just the world going. And she is called the Book Thief because obviously at the time they were burning books, and Liesel ends up stealing books, snatch, as we all would. I love this book and I cried so hard. I absolutely love The Book Thief. It is such a classic. It is told in the perspective of death, which is such a fun, crazy concept that I don't think anybody really does in their books. My first all-time favorite book is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. Okay, the next book I am absolutely thrilled. You may have heard of this. It did get turned into a movie a few years ago, I think. If it's more than that, I'm gone crazy. But this book, actually my dad lent to me to read and I ended up stealing it. So, because I love this book so much. If you had to ask me what was my favorite book out of all the books I'm about to show you, it would be this one. This is my all-time favorite book in the entire world. Let's just talk about it. I know. We have Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. And I know you're thinking, that's a movie, Trinity. No, it's not a movie. Ignore that. Read the book. Oh my God. Oh my God. I am obviously somebody who did not grow up with all of those old-timey 80s, 70s games. I'm quite young. However, my dad grew up with those things. So when he read this book and he suggested for me to read it, I was like, bet, let's do it. I'm in love with this book. It takes place in the future. Everything really sucks. We have Wade Watts, who is a teenager. There's the virtual VR reality oasis, and the owner and who made everything, he has passed away, and he left little Easter eggs in this world for people to find, and he left one clue, and then he's all right, everybody, if you can figure this out, you win my fortune. Wade Watts obviously is obsessed with this. He lives quite a crappy life in the real world, so he spends all of his time in the virtual reality trying to solve this puzzle, and it's basically just a puzzle treasure hunt in the future with riddles, and it's it's amazing. The movie doesn't even have a little inkling on it. Forget that entirely. Just read this book. It is so cool. I totally stole this book from my dad, by the way. Sorry, Dad. Everyone my age remembers where they were and what they were doing when they first heard about the contest. It is so cool. This book is a 5 out of 5 stars. Obviously, suggest it if you haven't read it yet. I'm still in the process of convincing my boyfriend to read it, so he better read it soon. Love this book. The next book I have to show you is actually kind of a recent favorite. I read it last year and then I reread it recently. Everybody's talking about it right now because it just got turned into a TV show. So without further ado, Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book has just evolved into one of my favorite books ever very recently. Upon rereading it, I was oh my God, I'm kind of obsessed with this, and I am obsessed with this book. It is a 5 out of 5 star for me. We follow Daisy, we follow this band called the Six and their rise and fall in the 60s. It has drugs, sex, alcohol, addiction, good music, good vibes, and the TV show is I'm sitting there with my book going, oh my God, they said that line. They said that. I'm very annoying about it, but I am absolutely in love with Daisy Jones and the Six. If you are to read any Taylor Jenkins Reid book in your life, I would definitely say, please, 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 please read this book. The next book I have is The Princess Bride by William Goldman. I'm currently pressing flowers in it, so ignore it. Look how pretty this book is. I actually bought this book because The Princess Bride is like my favorite movie in existence. It's just like romance, adventure, cheesy. It's so amazing. I'm also like in love with Wesley. That's a different issue. This book, let me just tell you, it is incredibly hard to find like an actual physical copy of The Princess Bride. It's just like nowhere. It's such a confusing thing to find. A tale of true love and high adventure. Pirates, princesses, giants, miracles, fencing, and a frightening assortment of wild beasts. The Princess Bride is a modern storytelling classic. We're following Buttercup and Wesley, the all-time favorite love story in existence. I don't know how else to describe this book. It's just one of those books where I read because I love the movie, and then the book made me love it even more. It's something that has shaped my life. It's always gonna be a favorite. It's always gonna be a 5 out of 5. This is like a comfort if I feel awful. Here we go. The Princess Bride, because like, okay, there's another one of my favorites. Please excuse the condition of this book, but the next book I'm going to show to you is Beartown by Frederick Backman. It's about a very small town who has like this junior hockey team, and they are like about to make it to like this big, the championships. I don't know all that much about hockey, but it is told, it's just so atmospheric. They're in like the forest, there's snow. There's an incident that happens with one of the coach's daughters and the team captain. I won't spoil it, but I will just say trigger warnings, trigger warnings, trigger warnings. It's like so everything, because we're getting different point of views as this certain event is happening, and it kind of like splits the town in half, because people are like, well, why would we believe her? We should believe him. And other people are like, what the heck are you talking about? You're only on his side because he's the captain and hockey is everything to you. So it very much divides the town. It divides the team. It divides everything. I can't even like describe with words how much this book means to me. It was another one where we were in class and our teacher was like, so like, I know I'm teaching you English, but like, I think you guys, every single one of you needs to pick up this book and read it. And we're like, done. Trust you. You're my English teacher. Trust, I will read this book. I just can't suggest this book enough if you're in a good mental state. However, there are 2 more books in this series. I think they wrote Us Against You and then The Winners are the other 2 books. I'm never going to read them. I am not going to touch them because I do not want this tainted in my mind. I will, however, read this book at one point. This definitely shaped me as a human girl. Sorry, in general, just read more Frederick Backman. His writing is so unique and so quirky and so realistic. Like you're like, oh yeah, that's a person. That's a real person. And you're like immediately on board and you understand everything. He has another book that I just read last year, which is Anxious People, which is another phenomenal book. You should definitely read it. This one is a 5 out of 5 stars. I suggest just reading Frederick Backman in general. He's a phenomenal writer. This book is a 5 out of 5 star. It's one of my favorite all-time books in the world. So yeah. The next book I am going to show you is my absolute favorite book I read last year. This book lives rent-free in my head. All of these books do, but this one specifically is in my brain every single day. Like I'm questioning and I'm thinking about it. It is amazing. We have If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I read this last year in September. It is kind of a dark academia, Shakespearean murder, psychological, found family. Like there's so much packed into such a small little book. This book, in a word, is cinematic. It is cinematic. The scenes, they do little things where they like have like a little gala and they're like recreating Romeo and Juliet at a ball, and everyone has their masquerades on and nobody knows which part you are until like the play starts. So like the opening actor would say their line and then the play just goes and you don't know who your scene partner is until you hear them speak. You just know your cue line. And like, anyway, there's like these certain scenes, and it's those scenes specifically that live in my head rent free. Like I can picture how they would be on a movie screen, like the camera angles, the dress, like everything. It is so vivid and amazing. And if you don't like Shakespeare, that is completely fine. Just go into it knowing that it's about Shakespeare a lot and that the characters are so theater kid, it's ridiculous. I think that's why I like it. I relate to it a lot. I love Shakespeare. I love theater. I love that world. So reading from the perspective of this character who went in to this world, it's insane. Anyway, I haven't explained the plot of the book yet. Oh my God. It is following a group of 7 friends who all go to the Shakespearean school. Oliver is our narrator. Every person in the group has like a different role that they play in the theater and outside of the theater within their group. One of the players, we'll call them, ends up getting murdered, and they all kind of panic to cover it up in a way but nobody actually knows who did it. Oliver, our narrator, ends up taking the blame, and we are kind of going from his perspective 7 years in the future after he's gotten out of jail for this, and he's telling the lead detective on the case what actually happened in great detail. This book, it is laid out like a Shakespeare. I don't know if that makes sense. It is laid out like we've got Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4. There's 5 acts. The scenes fall the same way a Shakespeare play would. I just can't get over how smart this book is. It has changed my life forever, lives rent-free in my head. I love If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. And if you don't like it, that's fine, but I love it. All right, the last general fiction book that I have that is my all-time favorite book ever, More Than This by Patrick Ness. Let me tell you, Patrick Ness is like one of my favorite authors ever. I love him so much. He's just such a great author. He wrote a Chaos Walking trilogy, A Monster Calls. He's got lots of books. He's been around the block a few times. Nobody had ever talked about this book ever. I read this when I was a wee babe, and it is 1000% still one of my favorite books ever. Seth drowns, desperate and alone, but then he wakes, naked, thirsty, starving, but alive. And where is he? The streets seem familiar and everything is abandoned, overgrown, covered in dust. He remembers dying, his skull bashed against the rocks. He is woken in his own personal hell. Is there more to this life, or perhaps is this the afterlife? As you can tell, Scott drowns himself. Like trigger warning, he does commit suicide at the very beginning of this book. But then he wakes up and he's naked and he's just laying on the street and he's just there. What happened? Why is he there? Huh? Why is he naked? He died. We read him dying, and we kind of get him exploring him waking up in this new world. And he can't tell if he's dead, if this is the afterlife, if this is real life, is he living in a simulation? Like, what is this? It is such a beautiful story about Seth kind of reviving his passion for being alive and like kind of going through why he wanted to end his life and why he's grateful to kind of be alive again. And it's kind of just that, and it's so wonderful. It's such a good book. No one ever talks about it. I will, however, warn you, the first half, you have to get halfway through before you understand what is happening. Oh, he is just discovering the world for this part, and then you understand what happens here, and then the whole rest of the book is amazing. This book is amazing. It is a 5 out of 5 stars. Please read this book. Please go enjoy it. I love it. That's that. Let's move on to some of my absolute favorite romance books I've ever read in my lifetime. However, I think all of these ones I've read recently because I didn't realize I liked romance until very recently. So I'm a wee babe at the romance game. We're gonna start with an oldie but a goodie that you probably just saw in my last video that I talked about, so I will not talk your ear off about it. We have Regretting You by Colleen Hoover. I talked lengths about how much I love this book. It is a 5 out of 5 star for me. It's a romance, but it's more of like a family dissection, I guess. We have Morgan and her 16-year-old daughter, Clara. Morgan had a teen pregnancy, which was Clara, and she ends up marrying her high school sweetheart. Something happens to him very tragically. There is drama. Another man from her past arrives, where Clara is also kind of falling in love with this boy from her school who also has a tragic past. And it's just the mothers and daughter connecting over this and figuring out how to move forward because they don't really click all that well. It had me crying, it had me laughing, it had me sobbing in the car. This book is a 5 out of 5 star. Regretting You by Colleen Hoover is one of those romance books that like lives in my head rent-free. The next few are kind of more popular-ish books, but that's completely fine. They can still be my favorites. Beach Read by Emily Henry. Let me tell you, I read People We Meet on Vacation before I read this book because I wanted to read them in order just to kind of see how her writing evolves. Oh, this book! Emily Henry. Let's talk about our Lord and Savior, Emily Henry. I'm never gonna stop calling her that, by the way, because she is my Lord and Savior. Her writing is just so genuine and sweet, and the way she writes banter. This story is a romance, but it follows so much more than that. I can't tell you why, because obviously that's a spoiler. Basically, it is about Augustus and January, who are both staying in beach homes that are right beside each other, and they're both authors. He writes like the great American classics. She writes really fluffy romances, but at this point in her life, she's kind of given up on love. So she's looking for something new to do. She has a manuscript due at the end of the summer. So through their quirky little banter and all that stuff, they're like, you know what, let's switch topics and let's write a book, and whoever sells their book first wins. I don't know. Through that, they fall in love. Through that, everything happens. And let me tell you, at first I was like, this book is kind of slow. This is a little slow. And then it was like 3 a.m. and I'm sobbing in my bed and I can't even read the pages because I was like, you know, and I just like I physically could not make myself stop reading this book. It was so gripping. Anyway, that's Beach Read by Emily Henry. Reading that. Here is another one that I have not talked about on my channel yet, but I read this actually for a book club because me and my friends have been hearing about it and we're like, you know what, that sounds good. I hear it's spicy, I hear it's like amazing. No, this book like reignited my passion for romance. Like it made me remember why I liked reading, why I got obsessed with characters, why I was like, oh my God, like engrossed in another person's life that doesn't exist. Obviously, we are talking about Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. This is like her first book ever. Pardon me? It is a romance with a hockey player and a figure skater. Something happens with the ice skating rink. They have to share an ice rink. Her partner gets hurt. He takes over. But this is so much more than that back. So much more happens. You read the back and you're like, oh, that's a pretty cute idea. Jaw on the floor. This book covers everything. It is amazing communication, wonderful characters. It has found family. It has just a romance and a spice that does not quit. It is amazing. We have the like little jealous golden retriever, and it's a reverse grumpy We follow Anastasia, or Stasi as she likes to be called, and Nathan Hawkins. I have not claimed a man in a book in a while, and I was like, Nathan Hawkins is my book boyfriend. He has jumped to the top of my list. He has risen. He is wonderful. I can't talk about it enough. It is one of the books that I'm like all-time fave, 5 out of 5. I was 80 pages in this book and I was like, you know what? As soon as I put it down, I'm gonna reflip it back to the start and start again. That's how obsessed I am. I really want to reread this book again. It's wonderful. And the last books I'm actually going to talk about is a series. It's not finished yet, but it is another one where I claimed my book boyfriend immediately and just could not stop. We have Heartstopper. All 4 volumes. All 4 are my favorites. Every single one, 5s across the board. It is an romance, and Nick Nelson. Charlie is like an openly gay student and he gets sat beside Nick, who's like a year above him in school. Charlie gets a little crush on him. Nick starts to realize a lot of stuff about his sexuality. If you've seen the show, you know what I mean. The show, the first season is actually like the first 2 volumes of the book, which is kind of them getting together, getting to know each other. And then by the time we get to the 3rd and the 4th volume, it is so much deeper. So much more is happening. We get lots more fun characters, lots of inclusivity, a lot of touchy topics, 5 out of 5, crying on the pages, absolutely obsessed. He also, I don't know if this has anything to do with anything, but Nick Nelson, another one of my favorite book boyfriends, gets a baby pug. So I don't know if that's why this is so high up on my list. Heartstopper, just the entire thing is one of my favorite books ever. And I feel like it has definitely shaped me as a human. It makes me giddy. It makes me happy. I think about these characters all the time and I think about how much I love them all the time. So yes, they are up on my romance recommendations, favorite books. 5s across the board. So those are some of my all-time favorite books in the world, excluding fantasy. We're gonna get to fantasy very soon. That was just kind of to get to know me a little bit more, get to know my taste in novels, in books, things I like to read, things I'm obsessed with, topics I like, things that pique my interest quite a bit. I'm so sorry I went on such a tangent for every single book because I put them all on the floor, I looked at them all and I went, oh, I like that, oh, I love that one, oh, that one's my favorite. Like, they're all my favorite. That's why they're all in this video. If you were to ask me, Trinity, what is your favorite book? I would reply, these. These are my favorite books. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching today's video. I hope I gave you some recommendations that you maybe haven't heard of, gave you some little things to check out. If you enjoyed today's video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to look at your shelf, give it lots of love, give it lots of kisses, and just have a great day.